Coming up on today's Locked On Dodgers, Jeff finishes his conversation with Keith Law of The Athletic, talking Dodgers prospects. So that's what's on tap, so make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Remember, this show is free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, just subscribe in all those places and everything will come right to you and never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time listening or watching, I'm Vince Samperio, Chavez Green Fiends. My usual co-host, Jeff Snider of Baseball Central, will be on later in the episode. Actually, I will not be in most of this episode as Jeff continues his conversation with Keith Law of The Athletic, talking Dodgers prospects. They get into Ryan Pepiot, Michael Busch, Miguel Vargas, and some others. But before we get into that, just want to remind you that we are Dodger fans, lifelong Dodger fans, just like you. We spend some time in the press box and in the locker room. That doesn't change who we are. We're not quite insiders, so we're here to deliver the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. So go ahead and smash that subscribe button, as the kids say, and let's talk some Dodgers and our conversation with Keith Law of The Athletic.
Two guys who kind of have taken opposite directions after, when they were both drafted together in 2019, near each other in the draft. Michael Busch and Cody Hosey, who, they've kind of, the similarities is mostly just their names are linked together because they were both drafted by the Dodgers in the first round that year. It seems like Michael Busch has gone up and Cody Hosey has gone way down. But let's talk about Michael Busch and what it is that excites you about him enough to put him at number 53 overall for a guy who was drafted as a first baseman. It's seems like a college first baseman being drafted doesn't scream top prospect, right?
Right. And if he weren't capable at second base, the Dodgers, that's bizarre, right? Who the heck takes a college first baseman, converts him to second? That's ridiculous, right? Nobody does that. The Dodgers did that, and he's fine. I've seen him play second. He's not winning a Gold Glove there, but he's fine. And now you put that bat at second base, and you got a chance for a real impact player, I think, pretty soon. I love this guy's swing. That's really the biggest. I saw him in college, and I was like, the swing is fantastic. There were questions about health back when he was in college. I think it was a back issue that some teams were a little wary of, and obviously for if he's just a first baseman, he's already getting hurt. What do we have here? Well, the Dodgers obviously I think it was a value play for them. Also, where they were getting him in the draft, they realized they were getting a player who was probably worth more than the draft position, but had fallen for reasons that didn't bother them. Also, they saw the potential to slide him to second base, and it has worked. The one thing that, and I mentioned this in my write-up on the top 100 to watch for, is that he's a left-handed hitter. Again, great swing. He's got a really good eye. He didn't do much against lefties last year, but it wasn't the typical lefty platoon split where he's punching out a lot, not drawing walks, just not even putting the ball in play. He did put the ball in play a lot. He did draw walks. He's not having the quality of contact that you need to see. That's a smaller platoon gap basically to close than the more typical one where it's the guy who just doesn't hit lefties, doesn't see the ball, doesn't make that kind of contact. And so that's why, because I run players down, left-handed hitters down all the time for having large platoon splits. That's why I treat him differently, because there's actually a difference in the type of platoon split that he's showing. He closes that even somewhat and still plays second base. You got a 55 above average everyday player in the big leagues. And a guy who I think is also, the Dodgers have a lot of infielders. They have a lot of bats in general. Busch is probably going to be pretty valuable if they don't have a spot for him when it comes to the trade market in July, or whenever we have a trade market, because he could step into the big leagues. By that point, certainly he could step into the big leagues right away for just about any club acquiring him.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess I should mention, as we're recording this, it's Tuesday early afternoon, and MLB and the Union are still meeting. We are both ignoring Twitter right now to have this conversation. They
For our
have
mental health. Right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
good.
Yeah, we're about 3.5 hours away from the latest self-imposed deadline. So we're kind of recording this on the assumption that we will have a season this year. But you know that most of these guys are going to play whether there's a season or not, because they're minor leaguers. They're not in the union. And so these guys are going to be playing. So I guess it doesn't affect your job as much as some other baseball writers.
No, I'm lucky in that regard, right? As long as, well, first of all, I'm going to try to go back to Georgia next week. I went last week. I got Drew Jones for, I think, 2 at-bats. It was just not a useful it was frustrating. So I've seen him. I saw him homer, actually. Not the most useful scouting trip, but the high schools and colleges are still going. So I can always do that. There will be some sort of minor league baseball in April. They've got to play. It'll be interesting to see what they do with 15 guys missing from every organization, or 14 guys, I guess, from every organization, because they're on the 40-man. But hey, if that means more kids get to play at the start of the year, okay, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about Miguel Vargas. This is a guy who didn't come out of nowhere for me, but it's like just suddenly you don't think much about him. Then you look and you're like, wow, this guy just hits everywhere he goes. And suddenly, like, I feel like offensively, he's ready for the big leagues. It's just a question of where he's going to play.
Yeah. So fun story that I don't think I've shared anywhere else. Vargas was on an early draft of my top 100 a year ago. I believe it was a year ago. It was 1 or 2 years ago. And to a man, every person within the industry, I circulate a rough draft of my top 100 to people within the industry, front office guys, pro scouting execs usually, or occasionally an AGM or somebody, if they're just people I know follow this stuff and have opinions, and also pro scouts who see a pretty good cross section of the minor leagues and who over the course of maybe 2 years will have seen a pretty high percentage of guys on the list. Every single person said to take Vargas off, and I'm kind of kicking myself because I think Vargas is pretty good, obviously. I don't think he's a superstar. I think he's really good, and I think he's going to be really good pretty soon. I agree with you. He's pretty close to a deserving a major league call-up, and the biggest question is going to be where he's going to play. And that would be true regardless of organization. This is not so much the Dodgers have a player here and a player here. Dodgers have players everywhere, right? It's just these rankings are team agnostic. If I was just trying to rank them based on who's blocking them, the Dodgers would never have a prospect, I think, right? Because they just have so many players. But this guy can really hit. And I mean, in the traditional sense of a guy who just makes lots of really good contact. Doesn't strike out much, has never struck out very much. Pretty good eye at the plate. There's power. His power has already increased over the last couple of years. I think there's probably a bit more. Look for him to start going the other way with power more. He can go the other way fine in terms of contact, but look for him to start going more towards right center with some of that power as well. That would probably be the logical next step in his progression. Third base is a struggle for him. And I said that in the write-up, and I don't think that's even surprising to people who've seen him play. I think if you're the Dodgers, you've got to give him every chance to stay at the position. There's a chance he ends up at first. And that's honestly, it's a big difference between him and somebody like Busch. I do know scouts who like him better than Busch. It would be close, but who would just flip the two. And they're only 12 spots apart in my top 100. But in Vargas's case, if he's just a first base DH type, whereas Busch has a pretty good chance to stay at second base, that's a big separator in terms of potential value, right? That's several runs a year. I don't know offhand what the positional difference is, but it might be close to a win a year just based on their relative positions. And that's enough to keep Vargas a little bit lower, even though I would tell you I have a higher confidence in Vargas's hit tool right now than I do in Busch's just pure hit tool.
Huh. Yeah, it's kind of interesting because we've evolved. We're smart enough to understand that strikeouts aren't the worst thing in the world. You know, a lot of the time a strikeout is not any worse than another out, but it's still exciting to think about a guy who puts the bat on the ball, you know, and who's going to come up and, you know, because sacrifice flies do score runs, you know, they are valuable. And it's not like the guys who strike out a lot can turn off the strikeout when there's a guy on third and less than 2 outs. It's, you know, they're still at risk of striking out. And something about a guy who, you know, is going to come up and put the ball and play for you and hit it hard somewhere is pretty exciting.
Oh, for sure. And one, as just a baseball fan above a certain age, I guess a lot of us are above a certain age, but yeah, I do miss seeing guys who just put the ball in play a lot, and then people running around the bases. And hey, if you hit the ball hard, sometimes the fielder doesn't field it cleanly or doesn't field it at all. And more interesting things happen. I understand that why the evolution of the game has led us to this point where it's a lot of 3 true outcomes, but that doesn't mean I prefer it from an aesthetic perspective. Give me guys who can hit. Give me guys who can field. Give me guys who can run. I love those types of players. And Vargas fits the first category. And I would love to see more teams. The Royals won a World Series by basically doing this not that long ago. Just a bunch of guys who put the ball in play. They weren't even all great athletes. A lot of them weren't runners, but they put the ball in play a lot and made things happen as a result.
So baseball needs more Eric Hosmers is what we're saying.
Oh my God. How dare you?
Oh,
Built bars are the best tasting protein bars on the market. They combine everything you like about candy bars, everything you like about protein bars, put it all together in one safe and great area called a Built Bar. And that's all you need for this world, for this life, whatever you're trying to do, whatever you're trying to get into, whatever you're trying to do in life. Built Bars are there for you. And guess what? If Built Bars aren't the thing for you, you can check out Built Puffs, the first protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. And they're also covered in 100% real chocolate. The best things about Built Puffs and Built Bars: low calorie, high protein, high fiber, low sugar. Replace your candy bars with Built Bars. You'll make a small change in life that won't really affect the bottom line, because Built Bars taste just like a candy bar. You're not going to lose anything in the flavor department. And right now, if you go to built.com, you can get 15% off any order with the promo code LOCKED15. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at built.com. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Before we get back to Keith's Law conversation, make sure to check out Locked On MLB Prospects with host Lindsey Crosby. He's also a prospect encyclopedia just like Keith Law, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts.
let's talk about Andy Pages. He's, I mean, 2 of his tools are remarkable. You have him as a 70 raw power and an 80 arm.
Yeah.
For those of you not familiar with the scouting scale, 80 is his best, as good as it can get. You know, 80 arm means this guy right now has, you know, one of the best arms in baseball, basically. And, but he also, he walks a lot, has a good eye at the plate, is cutting down on the strikeouts. Reading your paragraph about Andy Pages, it makes me wonder, okay, well, how come he's as low as he is on your list down at 76? So why do you hate Andy Pages?
I hate him. Andy Pages. Also, and for folks who don't know, his name is spelled Pages. And every time I see his name, I start hearing the Picture Pages song.
Andy Pages, come and get your Andy Pages.
Perfect. Thank you. Exactly.
Nice.
I know that's not how you pronounce it. I'm sorry. It's just what my brain does.
I like it.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Picture Pages, but not quite as good, but let's go with it.
Yeah.
He's really interesting. And I'm glad you mentioned the drop in his strikeout rate too, because that's basically what made him a top 100 prospect, right? That he showed the fear of him. Remember, he was almost traded a couple of years ago, right? That was really where his name first popped up for most folks, because he was still in rookie ball at the time. But this guy, it's crazy power. He's got an unbelievable arm. He strikes out a lot already at a young age at a low level. This could go, right? This could go either way. And in this case, it went the good way, where he cut the strikeout rate as he moved up, going from short season to full season, facing older pitching, missing a year, still brings the strikeout rate down. That's tremendous to me. It's such a positive sign for a guy's ability to make that kind of adjustment. I will say, as I spoke to people, again, throughout the industry, people who'd seen him or folks in front office who'd sort of done other work, analytics, video work, or just incorporating the reports they're getting from their own scouts, there's some question about how much he's really going to hit. Nobody's questioning the other tools. Nobody's questioning he's got a good eye, power, crazy arm, etc. But what's that batting average going to look like? And as a result, not the batting average is the be all and end all, but obviously it is kind of underpins your on base and your slugging. And is he just going to be a low average slugger? I kind of don't think so, but I will admit to sort of splitting the baby when it comes to the ranking, right? You could make a pretty good case for him to be in the top 50. I don't think there's a great case for him to be off the top 100, but if you really just believe this guy's not going to hit enough, okay. If you think he's going to hit 220, is he a top 100 prospect? He might still be, but he'd probably be towards the back. So I kind of went in the middle there and said, I have enough reason to think he's going to hit. I like the swing. I love guys who make that kind of positive adjustment. I cannot overstate that enough. If you're trying to figure out why these Keith rank players the way he does, that's one of the biggest things. When a player moves up a level and shows a positive adjustment in a core skill like that, that is such a great indicator for me, because it also tells me he can do it again. He can continue to make those improvements. Pies is going to get to some level. He'd go to, maybe spends this year at AA, and guess what? He's going to see guys who can locate their breaking stuff better than any pitchers he's really seen before. That's going to be a big adjustment for him to make. I have more confidence that he'll be able to do that now because of the quality of adjustment, the size of the adjustment that he made going from short season ball to high A between 19 and 21.
And we're talking about this adjustment he made. He improved his strikeout rate. To be clear, it's still very high. He's a 24% strikeout rate. That's still 150, 160 strikeouts over the course of a full season.
We live with that now.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was funny as a sort of thought process. I never got to do it because I just didn't have time. But what if I tried to do a list of the best prospects, but cut off their strikeout rates at 20% or 22%? The list would suck.
Yeah.
There just aren't enough good prospects, good in the sense of being able to do other things other than just put the ball in play. We have kind of this, there's a small group of players who don't strike out much and do other things, hit for power, or really run or field, etc. And there's a lot of guys who put the ball in play a lot, don't do a whole lot else. And there's the guys who strike out too much, but do lots of other really interesting things. And so, that's why I had to make some peace with the higher strikeout rates. There is a piece of me, the little voice in the back of my mind that's like, that strikeout rate is too high. What are you doing? You can't put that guy on the list. But in fact, if I don't put those guys on the list, then there just aren't enough good prospects in the minors. It's all shifted. And some of these guys, Paz at least is going down. The strikeout rate is going down, right? It doesn't even have to go any lower. If he holds it 24% all the way up to the big leagues, he'll be fine. If it continues to go down, there's some non-zero chance it will, because he's already shown us what he can do. Then he's got a chance to be a star.
Yeah, absolutely. A couple more guys I want to talk about. Eddie's Leonard, who I think he is 98 on your list. I think you were the only one who had him in the top 100. But the Dodgers saw enough in him last year that they put him on the 40-man roster to protect him for the Rule 5 draft, and seemed to think that he, and my favorite part of your write about him is that you ended by saying that he has a chance to be in the top 25 next year.
Yeah. We just have to see him. I mean, this guy murders fastballs, good fastballs. And with this higher emphasis on fastball quality that we have in the sport now, pretty much throughout the sport, when you find a guy who shows he can hit better quality fastballs, you go 93 up with life, and this guy can hit it. That's pretty exceptional. And, and it's not like he can't hit non-fastballs. It's just he's so good against fastballs. That's all anybody can talk about. When I talk to guys who've scouted him, when I talk to guys on the R&D side, it's pretty exceptional, his ability to hit these better quality fastballs, including fastballs up, which are often pitches that hitters just cut right under. So what I said in the report was, if he shows he can hit some off-speed stuff, kind of the way he crushes fastballs, this guy's a star. He's played shortstop and second. They tried him out in center field. Here I have it in front of me for 11 games. That might be the better option for him, especially since the Dodgers always seem to have a lot of shortstops, and maybe you want a plus defender at short. Leonard's probably not a plus defender there, but he's going to stay in the middle of the field somehow. Looks like he can really hit. He's got some power already, and it's hard line drive contact without a ton of strikeouts. I mean, this guy just checks a whole lot of boxes. And the way people were effusive about, scouts who'd seen him were effusive about talking about him, definitely boosted my own confidence in putting him on the list. I mean, I feel pretty good about his ranking there, about having him somewhere on the top 100. He was 98, so he's just barely on it, but he was on it. That was a statement that I believe in him enough as a prospect. I also think the Dodgers made a statement by putting him on their 40-man, and they probably would have lost him. Somebody would have taken him. It doesn't mean they would have kept him all year. People know who Leonard is. They put Leonard and Horbit Vivas on the 40-man, and I think they probably would have lost both of those guys if we'd had a Rule 5 draft in December, and they had not protected them.
Yeah. Ryan Pepio is a guy who Dodger fans who, maybe not the people who really, really study prospects, but Dodger fans who are, somewhat aware of Dodger prospects often say Bobby Miller and Ryan Pepio in the same sentence as two guys who we could see in 2022, actually as part of the team, whether in the bullpen or, with all the question mark, the Dodgers, MLB.com's current Dodgers depth chart on starting pitching only has 3 guys listed. There's the Dodgers have some work to do.
You're actually number 4.
Yeah, I'm pitching, and
gotta go get loose.
And then me left-handed is number 5.
Yes.
So it's and so there may be some possibilities for guys to make that jump. Obviously, I expect the Dodgers to make some moves once this lockout ends and fill some of those holes. But Ryan Pepio, I guess my point in mentioning that he's mentioned in the same sentence as Bobby Miller a lot is that, to Dodger fans, they're kind of not quite interchangeable, but there's a lot of excitement about both of them. Pepio didn't quite make your top 100. He's in your just missed list. But you mentioned the Dodgers probably have 10 guys who, if it was a top 150 list, their top 10 would probably be on that top 150. And so tell me, the thing that stands out about your write-up about Ryan Pepiot is the 80 grade changeup, which again, that means Ryan Pepiot right now, if he was in the major leagues, would have one of the best changeups in baseball.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's exactly right. It's an elite changeup. He's got an above average fastball. It's kind of interesting that you would expect a right-hander with a changeup that's that good to just destroy left-handed batters. Turns out he actually uses it for right-handed batters just as much. And I think as a 2-pitch guy, he could come up to the majors and pitch in the Dodgers bullpen immediately. My guess is that's how we first see him in the big leagues, regardless of whether the Dodgers intend to develop him as a starter in the long term, which I think for now, at least, they do. He's not Bobby Miller. And I think that's probably not a really evidence-based argument for putting them together in that, yes, Pepio has a better single pitch in the changeup than any of Miller's 4 offerings. However, Miller throws a lot more strikes. Excuse me. And Miller has the changeup and has 2 viable breaking balls. And Pepio right now, it's just an okay breaking ball. Maybe he can get to one. I don't want to underestimate the Dodgers player development folks, but right now Pepio is basically a 2.5 pitch guy. He's going to mostly be fastball changeup, especially if they put him in the bullpen right now. That's what you're going to see. He's mostly fastball changeup. And that may be the best way to break him in also because he doesn't throw enough strikes right now. And I think he's getting away a bit with out of zone chases. And that's not to say he can't improve. He's supposed to be a pretty good athlete. They say that people who've seen him, people especially in the Dodgers organization, believe that he will bring those walks down and improve his strike percentage over time. I'm not necessarily doubting it, but I'm looking at Miller, who already does throw a ton of strikes and has the potentially 3 or 4 weapons against Pepio, who doesn't throw nearly enough strikes and really has 2 weapons. And to me, that's a pretty easy call which guy I would rather have.
That makes a lot of sense.
Football season's over. Baseball season is not started yet, but don't worry about it. BetOnline.net has you covered with everything you need for basketball, both pro and college hoops, as they head into the big times of their season and the postseason. For all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, everything you need, BetOnline.net is the number 1 spot for all your sports betting needs and the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net has you covered for hockey, UFC, and even boxing. Whatever you need, BetOnline.net has you covered. Head to the website today on your laptop or mobile device. Learn more about all the trends. Learn more about all the action going on and get in on it. BetOnline, where the game starts.
Couple quick hits. Jose Ramos and James Outman, 2 outfielders who are, ranked 10th and 11th on your Dodgers prospect lists. Jose Ramos is a guy who I had never heard of until a couple months ago. And, maybe says more about me than about him, but I think he has jumped up a lot recently. And Outman was always in my mind, he's an organization depth guy who's, he'll play outfield for you on one of your minor league teams that needs an outfielder. But now they're both, relatively prospecty.
Yeah, and he stunk. Outman, just to pick up where you left off, right? Outman was not good in 2019, and he was 22 in low A. He was old for the level. He was a college product who didn't hit. Well, that guy gets released quite a bit. To his tremendous credit, he overhauled his swing, and now he's like I wrote, he could be a 25 homer, 25 steal guy who might post above average on base percentages too, because he's got a pretty good idea at the plate. The problem was there was just so much swing and miss, and the contact quality wasn't there before the pandemic. He comes back this year. He's a completely different guy. I saw him a bit in the fall league and actually had a hard time connecting him with the player he was before the pandemic, because he just was nothing like what I remembered from him. And so, I don't know if he's really like, he has the ceiling of an above average regular. I don't know if he gets there, but that is now within the range of possibilities. Whereas previously that was just unthinkable with his previous swing. Ramos, on the other hand, is I guess a bit more of a traditional international free agent success story. He signed for just 30 grand, which is kind of embarrassing for baseball, but that's, we can talk about the exploitation of international free agents on a different podcast, I guess. But all he does is hit. He already hit, despite the fact that his swing is not that great. There's a lot that player development could probably do to help him clean up his mechanics. But so far, he's just so good. He's got such good hand-eye. He's got some power. He's an average runner. He's got a plus arm. The Dodgers have a lot of great outfield arms. Between Pajes and Ramos, I would go to watch a throwing competition between those guys. Just put them both in right field and just keep feeding balls to them. I think that Ramos was my sleeper for the Dodgers system this year. I think he's got star upside. He's a long way away from it. And there's a lot that has to be done, I think, to help him get there. But again, talking about ranges of outcomes, the fact that people are even talking about him this way, even, with such limited pro experience at this point, I think really speaks to how much potential upside there is, how much untapped potential there is for himself and for player development to work with.
Awesome. Last question.
Mm-hmm.
Not surprisingly, considering that even though the draft was only 20 rounds last year, the Dodgers somehow managed to draft 857 pitchers. Not
as many as the Angels, though.
One less, I think. Your numbers 12 through 20 on the Dodgers top 20, the last 9 guys on the list are all pitchers, and mostly guys who have been drafted, with some exceptions, a couple that have been around for a little while. Mostly, I guess Michael Grove is the one who's been in the organization for a few years, but for the most part, it's guys who've been drafted or signed in the last couple of years who are just who excites you about that? Obviously, that I could look at the order they're ranked in, but one thing you mentioned is that who was, I'm trying to see that you said might make an impact the soonest, even though he's not necessarily the top of the list. I'm
not sure which guy I said that about. Well, we did see Andre Jackson in the big leagues last year. You could take somebody like Emmett Sheehan, who was 16th on the list. He was their 6th round pick. He was 90, 92 most of the spring. He's 94, 99 a month after he's drafted. He's a 3-pitch guy. He worked as a starter in college. It's a pretty short arm action. Maybe that pushes him to the pen. If the Dodgers just wanted to say, we're putting you in relief, they could run a guy like that right up to the big leagues, I think. Funny you mentioned, I did not realize the last 9 guys in the system were pitchers. I guess I'm I'm just staring at the trees and I miss the forest sometimes. But it speaks to just how good of a job they've done. Most of those guys are draft guys, and there's more. There's just, I was mentioning before, the guy who said the Dodger system just keeps going. He was really talking about the pitching. There's so much more, especially if you're working as a pro scout for another club or in pro scouting, and you're looking to do a deal with the Dodgers. I think they've got a lot more pitching that I didn't even get to in their system. Guys who are like good middle relief prospects who are just not the types of guys I typically cover. But to be back to your question, the guy I'm really absolutely most interested in seeing this year, one way or another, is Nastrini. He was their 4th round pick. He he just walked more than a guy an inning at UCLA in the spring. But the Dodgers, I knew area scouts who liked this guy, and the Dodgers said, we thought we saw some things we could straighten out pretty quickly. And he was much better in pro ball. Not all the way, but he cut his he cut his walk rate by half from the spring to what he did in pro ball. And he was punching out everybody. So, I mean, striking them out, not actually different. I really want to see what that looks like in over the court. Now he'll have an instructs, a full off season. The non-40 man guys get a real spring training. They're all there working with coaches. A lot of them are working with big league coaches now. Really want to see what that looks like.
I found it was actually number 8, Landon Knack, who you said,
oh, okay. I was looking too
if
low
he stays healthy, he should make an impact sooner than most of the other arms on this list.
Yep.
So that makes sense. Punch outs. We're saying punch out. I don't know if you've listened to many Dave Roberts interviews, but he's got all this shorthand that he uses, and so he just says punch. So if a guy has 8 strikes, 8 punch.
Yeah. I hear that all the time. Doesn't punch. This guy doesn't punch. I say it every once in a while. When it's funny how over the this is a little tangent for us to close on, but obviously I'm in the industry for 20 years now, and 2002 was my first year with the Blue Jays, and the vernacular has kind of changed over that time. Like I never heard it referred to as just punch until the last 3-4 years. Yeah. And suddenly, a lot of punch or, 8 punches.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. Maybe we're just getting lazier and we've gone from punch outs to punch, and pretty soon it'll just be like puh.
I've also heard Dave Roberts say nice throw to a pitcher, like instead of nice pitch, which it's like, are we just doing like baseball managers who sound like they've never seen a baseball game before?
That's really weird.
Yeah. Yes. Obviously he knows his stuff, but yeah, like yes. I actually heard him say,
oh, well tossed there.
Yeah. Maybe that's next for Dave Roberts. Maybe he's just messing with all of us. So
that's quite possible.
So we've talked about punching people out. We talked about Chevy Chase, and we made a vague reference to Bill Cosby. So seems like our work here is right. That was Picture Pages, right? Wasn't that a Bill Cosby thing? We also talked about some Dodgers prospects. So I guess we've done everything we needed to do here. Keith, I really appreciate you taking the time. Obviously your list is the best because it does have the Dodgers at the top. Like you said, there are a lot of other good lists out there, and it's Eric Longenhagen really knows his stuff too. Kylie McDaniel, obviously, a ton of people who really know what they're talking about, and so
they're just wrong on the Dodgers, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's exciting time to be a Dodger fan that they continue to pump out this kind of farm system while also, by the way, being one of the best teams in the big leagues, and obviously money helps with that side of things, but that creating a pipeline that can just keep generating talent that you can either use in the big leagues or trade for Mookie Betts. It seems like a pretty good recipe for success.
They traded the 1 and 2, I think I had on their system, on their ranking a year ago, both went to Washington.
Yeah.
I think they were 1 and 2. If they weren't 1 and 2, they might've been 1 and 3 a year ago, but they trade 2 of their top 3 or 4 prospects and get, a couple months of Max Scherzer, a year and a couple months of Trey Turner, and still have the top farm system in baseball. To quote, I think it was Flea from The Big Lebowski, "It's not fair."
And I disagree. I think it's very fair, and it's the way it should be. Thanks, Keith. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I want to once again thank Keith Law of The Athletic for joining us and talking Dodgers prospects. Appreciate him for giving us our time, and appreciate you for giving us your time. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. We'll be back next week talking about the Dodgers, different areas that they stack up in the NL West. We'll talk about maybe some lockout talk. Depends what happens this weekend. We got it all covered for you next week, so make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers and make your second listen of the day Locked On MLB. Sully, a.k.a. Paul Francis Sullivan, or the other way around, brings you his unique perspective on the major leagues past and present. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. If you want to find us wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, remember, just search Locked On Dodgers. If you want to find us on social media, we are on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vince Samperio. Get hold of us through DMs via any of those accounts. You can also get hold of us via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via text voicemail at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Tell your smart device play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree, you just have to listen. Have a good one.